Hi, my name is Thomas Mee and this is my AS Media Evaluation, where I'm answering the question, in what way does your media product use, develop or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? I think that our film opening Piper does a good job at both being inspired by many conventions from other psychological thrillers, as well as subverting many conventions, taking it away from the norm and making it unique. My first example of how the opening follows these conventions would be how all the characters wear very generic or normal clothing. Mr. Brown wears the typical school teacher uniform as he wears a smart shirt and then a more casual sweater over the top. This makes the viewer empathise with him as he seems like a normal guy, which amplifies the shock as the audience realises who he really is. This is a generic convention of thrillers, where the writer subverts the viewer's opinion in a character. This is usually done in a very subtle or minimalistic way, which we did by only showing what was wrong in a single shot at the end of the opening. We also use very generic or normal locations to give a familiarity to the audience. This is used to give viewers a fake sense of security, which emphasises the shock factor at the end of the scene. The fact that the opening is filmed in the countryside also helps make the ending more shocking, as there is a stereotype that crime isn't very common in rural areas, making the viewer feel safe. These narrative techniques are all used to amplify the shocking twist, which is very commonly used in psychological thrillers, because the more shocking the twist is, the more the audience wants to continue watching. We also use a few gritty or creepy areas to represent Mr. Brown as a suspicious character, and giving the audience a few clues that they're not who they think he is. Psychological thrillers usually follow a certain story cycle, which I think the whole film will follow perfectly. The cycle starts with some sort of equilibrium, which in Piper's case is the school teacher simply reading a story out to the class. The cycle starts with some sort of equilibrium, which in Piper's case is the school teacher simply reading out a story to the class. Then there is a disruption of this equilibrium, which is shown by the cold and distant nature in how Mr. Brown drives his car out of the school and how much grittier the locations of music are. The end of the opening represents the third point in the cycle, which is the recognition of the disruption, where Mr. Brown is revealed to have kidnapped one of the children from the class. The other two stages, an attempt to repair the damage and a new equilibrium, would then be addressed in the rest of the film, meaning that Piper has followed this generic convention perfectly. Piper contains some of the typical psychological thriller themes, which are reality, perception, mind, existence, or purpose. Piper contains some of the typical psychological thriller themes, which is reality, perception, mind, existence or purpose, identity, and death, though it does not follow them all, as some don't fit the plot of the film. Piper plays with themes such as perception, where the viewer perceives Mr. Brown as innocent and then has their perception completely changed. Mind, as Mr. Brown is a psychopath-sociopath, and identity, as Mr. Brown constantly switches between the two personas. The biggest point that shows Piper subverting generic conventions of psychological thrillers is that the plot is based on the story of Pied Piper. Psychological thrillers rarely base their stories off of fairy tales, but ours does.